The fog curled low over the pavement like breath from the earth itself. Amara stood at the edge of the Rotterdam gate, one hand cradling her baby, the other balled into a fist too weak to knock and too proud to tremble. Ow! Her jeans were soaked. From last night's rain, and her coat borrowed from a church bin hung off her frame like it didn't know her body. She hadn't meant to come here. Not to this neighborhood, with its trimmed hedges and robotic sprinklers. Not to this house, with its Roman columns and motion sensor lights that snapped awake when she stepped too close. But when the soup kitchen said we're out, and the shelter said try again Monday, and the baby cried with a sound she hadn't heard before, fun, dry, defeated, Amara started walking. And she didn't stop until the sidewalks turned pristine and the street lamps stopped flickering. It's the kind of place where people didn't knock. They were buzzed in. She pressed the doorbell with the back of her knuckle. The sound of it felt intrusive, like she'd just broken some invisible law. There was no answer. The baby stirred against her chest. She adjusted the cloth wrap and kissed the little forehead. "Almost there, baby. Just one more try," she whispered. She stepped back and looked at the mansion. Its windows were too clean to reflect her. The lawn was still wet from the sprinklers. Somewhere behind one of those high, glinting windows, someone was sipping coffee. She knew it. Someone was sitting warm and full, watching a morning show that made jokes about traffic. "I'll clean your house," she said aloud. Her voice startled her hoarse, unrecognizable. "Please. Just one meal." The gate buzzed. A sharp, metallic click, then silence. She didn't know whether to enter. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone meant to open it for a gardener, or a delivery, or go, she told herself. Legs moved before her thoughts caught up. The path was gravel-lined and perfect. Each step was guilt and grit. With every inch, she thought about turning back. But then the baby whimpered again, and the soft sound reminded her what mattered more than pride. The front door opened before she reached it. A man stood there tall, not young, with silver hair combed back like a movie executive. His eyes weren't unkind, but they were sharp, scanning her like she was a glitch in his reality. His bathrobe was thick, white, expensive. His hand rested on the doorknob like it wasn't sure it wanted to let go. He said nothing. "I'm sorry," Amara said, eyes low. "I know this is wrong. I'm just tile clean anything. My baby hasn't eaten since yesterday." The words came out too fast, not rehearsed, just desperate. She hated how small she sounded, how broken. The baby stirred again. One little fist peeking out from the blanket. The man's gaze dropped to it and lingered there longer than expected. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not recognition, not pity. Something deeper, quieter, maybe memory. He stepped aside without a word. The door yawned open. She walked in. Heart beat loud in her ears, her shoes leaving wet marks on polished marble. The warmth hit her like a wave. Her breath caught. Inside, everything was too white, too silent. She felt like an ink stain on snow. The man said nothing as he closed the door behind her. The baby cooed soft, almost surprised by the change in temperature, and then, from the second-floor footsteps, she didn't know yet who they belonged to, but she knew this was only the beginning. The door closed with a soft thud behind her. But it echoed in Amara's spine like a verdict. She stood just inside the grand foyer, her shoes bleeding damp onto a white Persian rug. Before her stretched a hall of polished marble, twin staircases spiraling upward like frozen ribbons. Framed oil paintings loomed on either side, portraits of serious-faced men in tailored suits and women draped in furs. Their eyes seemed to follow her. Mr. Thorne stood silent for a moment, his fingers twitching at the belt of his robe. His gaze drifted from Amara's face to the bundled baby in her arms, then to the bag slung over her shoulder. He cleared his throat. "You said you'd—" "Clin," he said, not asking. She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Anything you need. Just if I could feed him first." His brow twitched like her voice had nudged some part of him not often touched. He nodded once, then turned without a word, motioning for her to follow. They passed room after room. Art Deco furniture, untouched bookshelves, windows tall enough to reach the sky. Amara kept her gaze low. The baby whimpered softly against her chest. In the kitchen, everything gleamed. Chrome appliances, marble counters, a glass bowl of oranges so perfect they looked fake. Mr. Thorne gestured vaguely toward the fridge. Take. What you need. There's formula in the cabinet, I think. Amara blinked, then moved swiftly, one hand finding a bottle, the other steadying her child. She worked quickly, instinctively, head bowed. Thorne leaned against the doorframe, watching. Something about her presence felt jarring. It's like seeing a painting where it didn't belong. He wasn't used to company, not anymore. The housekeeper. When she came, left before noon, his last dinner guest had been 2 years ago, and yet here she was, standing barefoot on imported tile, feeding her baby with a calmness that somehow shamed him. He turned away in his study. The fireplace glowed faintly. He dropped into the leather chair and stared at the framed article on his wall. Thorne Textile Empire. 3 generations of growth. He knew the history. His grandfather had built the fortune on cheap labor and quieter sins. In the 60s, black applicants weren't a good fit, even when qualified. That line still echoed in old HR memos he'd once found in the basement. Now, he lived on the wealth of ghosts. Down the hall, cupboard door creaked. He re-entered the kitchen to find Amara wiping the counter. The baby slept against her chest. You don't have to, he started. She didn't look up. I said I would. Silence settled again, heavy, fragile. What's your name? He asked Amara, she said, still wiping. He watched her. Did. Nodded once and walked away. From the upstairs window, Clara watched through her binoculars. Her lips thinned. Her phone hovered over the keypad, next door. Things like this didn't happen. Not in this neighborhood. Not without someone saying something. The morning sun filtered through the double-height foyer windows, casting slanted shadows across the grand staircase. Amara moved slowly, her fingers wrapped around a damp cloth, carefully wiping the carved oak banister. Each step creaked softly beneath her as she worked downward, pausing now and then to adjust the sleeping baby strapped to her chest. The house was silent, but not empty. Somewhere upstairs, Mr. Thorne paced. He hadn't spoken much since yesterday, just a quiet gesture toward the staircase and a brief nod of approval, no questions, no thanks. Amara preferred it that way. She was halfway. Down when the doorbell rang. It was sharp and impatient, the kind of ring that demanded not ask for attention. She hesitated. Leave it, Mr. Thorne called faintly from above. It's probably Clara. She never needs anything urgent. Too late. Through the frosted glass, Amara saw a tall woman in a lemon-yellow coat, hair in a perfectly sprayed bob, eyes narrowed beneath designer sunglasses. She was already peering in, knocking now with tight-clipped raps. Amara opened the door just enough to speak. Hello. Clara's expression shifted the moment she saw her. Excuse me, she said sharply. What are you doing here? Amara blinked. I'm cleaning. Mr. Thorne let me in. Clara's nose wrinkled. She leaned closer, peering inside, ignoring the baby. You're cleaning? Yes, ma'am, Amara said evenly, gripping the edge of the door. Clara looked. Her up and down, slowly, as if memorizing a description for the police. I don't recall ever seeing you around here. This is a private residence, private community. I'm aware. And Mr. Thorne, he knows you're here. Amara bit back the sting. Yes, he's upstairs. Clara's eyes flicked toward the baby. Is that a child you bring in? A baby into someone's home like this? Amara didn't answer. She simply stared back. Calm. To calm, you people really have no shame. Clara muttered under her breath, loud enough to be heard. Showing up at people's doors like this? We pay good money for our safety, you know? Before Amara could speak, Thorne appeared at the top of the stairs. Clara, he said, voice clipped. Is something wrong? She turned, immediately sweetening. Oh, Daniel, I didn't realize you were home, I saw. A stranger, and thought maybe your housekeeper was away and someone had come in? He descended slowly. She's helping me. Today? And I invited her. Clara smiled thinly. Of course. He's just looking out for you. Appreciate it, he said without meaning it. She offered a final tight nod to Amara, then turned. "Lovely to meet you," she said, words sour in her mouth as she walked briskly down the front steps. Amara closed the door quietly. Thorne lingered a moment, then vanished into the hall without a word. Alone again, Amara leaned against the stone wall. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the cold rage of being made small. Again in front of her child, she straightened slowly, held her baby tighter, and returned to the staircase. Behind her, the world outside buzzed with sprinkler, clicks, and silence. And upstairs, the baby began to cry. The walls of the guest room were pale blue, almost sterile. A vase of artificial orchids sat stiffly on the dresser, untouched for years. The sheets smelled faintly of mothballs and lemon polish. Amara paced softly across the room, her baby cradled. Against her chest, his whimpers now steady, cries sharp, aching, insistent. She had tried everything, feeding, rocking, mumming the lullaby her mother used to sing. But tonight, none of it worked. The door creaked open. Thorne stood in the hallway, robe loosely belted, brows furrowed. "Is everything all right?" she hesitated. "He's hungry again, tired. He doesn't sleep well in strange places." He nodded, eyes lingering on the baby. "You can use this room for the night. It's quieter here." "Thank you," she said softly. She didn't ask if it was generosity or just self-preservation. Either way, it bought her time. Later, after the crying eased into shallow breaths and the baby finally slept, she stepped quietly into the hallway, surprised too. Find Thorne still awake, sitting in the dim light of the living room, swirling something amber in a crystal glass. He looked up as she entered. "Couldn't sleep?" She shook her head, wrapping her arms around herself. "I don't sleep much these days." He gestured to the armchair across from him. She sat cautiously. "I meant to ask earlier," he said. "What happened?" "To bring you here." She watched the flames in the fireplace flicker before answering. "I had a job," she began, her voice low. "Receptionist at a property management firm. Small office, good enough to get by." He listened quietly one day. One of the senior partners made a joke about hiring fewer names that sound like mine. She paused. I laughed, like we're trained to. But when I told HR, suddenly I was missing shifts. Then they said I was disruptive, and then I wasn't needed. Thorne looked down. "I found temp work, then lost the lease after the landlord reviewed the neighborhood demographic." I asked what that meant. He said I was welcome to try somewhere else. "You reported it? To who?" she asked, eyes locked on him now. "You think anyone cares?" Silence. I worked 2 jobs. Held him, she glanced toward the hallway while taking phone calls. I applied for over 60 apartments, got denied from 58. The other 2 never called back. She leaned forward, eyes sharp but tired. "What would you do, mister?" "Thorne, if the world saw your child as a threat before he could walk." He had no answer. Only the quiet hiss of the fire. She stood slowly. "Good night." As she returned to the guest room, she found her baby still asleep. Arms stretched upward, like he was dreaming of sky. She lay beside him and stared at the ceiling. Outside, wind brushed the trees, and at the edge of the neighborhood, someone was making a phone call, one that would arrive the next morning in a clipboard and a badge. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:32 a.m. Amara had just finished changing the baby on the guest bed, humming softly as sunlight pooled onto the floor. Downstairs, Mr. Thorne was on a call, his voice low and clipped through the hallway vent. The mansion, usually still, suddenly felt charged. She carried the baby toward the stairs as Thorne opened the front door. "Mr. Thorne?" the woman asked, her badge already visible. "I'm Officer Jen Morales with Child Protective Services. We received an anonymous report." Amara froze at the top step. Officer Morales was short, in her late 30s, dressed in plain slacks and a soft windbreaker over her uniform. Her dark hair was tied tightly back. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Thorne stepped aside. Amara descended slowly. The baby nestled tightly to her chest. Morales' eyes landed on her. A beat of silence. Then the officer pulled out a small tablet, locking the screen with a practice swipe. We received a call stating that a minor is living in this home under the care of a woman who is not the legal tenant or homeowner. The caller claimed concern for the child's well-being and sanitary conditions, lack of shelter, food insecurity. Thorne's brow furrowed. That's absurd. Morales raised a brow. Is she staying here? She is, Thorne said flatly. My guest. Temporarily, Morales turned to Amara. May I speak to you alone? Amara nodded numbly. They stepped into the sitting room. Morales glanced once over her shoulder to ensure Thorne wasn't listening, then leaned in slightly. Look, she said, her voice softer now. I know exactly what this is. Rich neighbor sees a black woman with a baby at the wrong address, and suddenly, it's a neglect case. I've been doing this job long enough to know when a report's filed out of malice. Not concerned. Amara stared at her, unsure whether to speak. I still have to file my visit, Morales said gently. I have to check the boxes. But I'm not here to hurt you. Amara exhaled sharply, her knees almost buckled, and she sat down without meaning. 2, the baby shifted sleepily. Do you have diapers? Morales asked. Yes. Formula? Yes. She nodded, tapping the screen. He looks healthy, clean, attached. You're doing fine. Amara blinked fast. Her throat burned. You don't know how many women I've met, Morales added, who broke down after visits like this. It's not the fear, it's the insult. It's the idea that love could be questioned because it doesn't look rich enough. Was it the tears came then not from fear but weariness, from fighting so long, so hard, for something as simple as being seen. After Morales left, Amara sat in silence beside the crib. Her hand brushed the baby's cheek. He smiled in his sleep. Down the hall, Thorne stood by the window. Watching Clara's shutters twitch for the first time, felt the weight of his silence. The house was too quiet, until from the west wing, a floorboard creaked onto Mara noticed, for the first time. The portrait with Thorne's grandfather's name beneath it, A. Man who built empires from exclusion. Thorne stood alone in the west wing corridor, its hush broken only by the faint hum of the air vents. He ran his fingers along the edge of a mahogany. Console hand. Imported, dustless, loveless. Before him hung portraits of men with the same bone structure and steel gaze. Thorne men, businessmen, landowners, empire builders. He paused at the largest, Edward H. Thorne. 1902-1981, his grandfather's. Reed, visionary, pioneer, philanthropist. I didn't mention the strikes he'd crushed, the black applicants, whose resumes were thrown away unopened, the neighborhoods his company redlined out of existence. The empire wasn't just built, it was inherited on the backs of those barred from building their own. Behind him, Amara's soft footsteps approached. She carried the baby on her hip, and though her expression was unreadable, flicked up to the portrait. Looks like a man who's never heard the word no, she said quietly. Thorne's mouth twitched, then settled. He didn't hear much of anything that didn't serve him. He turned. Amara, I've been thinking. I sponsor a foundation gala every year. It's mostly donors and city officials. If you wanted to tell your story, your real story, it could make people listen. She blinked slowly. To what end? To humanize it. To remind them this is happening, that it's not abstract. Her jaw tightened. Amy, so I'm the emotional centerpiece between the wine and the dessert auction? He said nothing. I've spent my whole life trying not to be someone's lesson, she added. He nodded, stepping back. I understand. But that night, after the baby had been rocked to sleep, Amara sat alone on the patio, staring into the dark. Jen's words echoed, It's not your job to make them comfortable. It's your right to be heard. She thought of her mother, who'd once marched for change and was buried before it came. She thought of every time she'd been passed over, talked down to, silenced. The next morning, she knocked gently on Thorne's study door. I'll do it, she said, standing tall. But I won't smile through it. I won't say what they want to hear. I'll say what they need to hear. Thorne met her gaze and for once didn't look away. Later that afternoon, the baby wobbled upright beside the couch. Amara reached toward him just in time to see his first tiny, unsure steps across the cold, shining marble floor. He giggled, clapping his hands. She laughed a sound light enough to crack the weight of the house, and down the hall, the portrait of Edward H. Thorne gazed forward, unmoved. But this room, this moment, was no longer his. The ballroom glittered. Crystal chandeliers swayed slightly above a sea of gowns and tuxedos, the hum of soft jazz floating in the air. Waiters moved with silver trays, champagne flutes sparkling. It smelled of money old and unbothered. Amara stood at the edge of the stage, heart steady, palms damp. Thorne sat near the front, alone at his table, his name on a glossy tent card. He gave her a small nod, not of approval, but of quiet respect. A woman in pearls introduced her. Our next speaker is someone with a story you need to hear. Amara stepped up. The lights were warm on her face. She could barely see past the first row. She cleared her throat. A few weeks ago, I stood outside a mansion with my baby in my arms and hunger in my bones. I asked to clean floors for one meal. The crowd quieted. I wasn't looking for pity. I was looking for a door not slammed in my face. Her voice grew stronger. I had a job. I paid rent. I followed the rules until the rules moved. Until someone decided my name was too much, my presence too loud, my dignity too inconvenient. A murmur in the back. An older man shifted uncomfortably. I'm not a statistic, she continued. I'm a mother. I'm a worker. I'm someone who was told to wait her turn while the line disappeared in front of her. She paused. Some of you will forget this tomorrow. Some of you are already checking your watches. But someone out there hears me and knows they aren't invisible. The room was still. Amara stepped down, not waiting for applause. It came anyways, low at first, then steady. Thorne remained seated, eyes full but unreadable. Later, as guests began to leave, two women approached her quietly. One offered a business card, the other simply said, "Thank you." She didn't smile, but she nodded. That was enough. Outside, the air was cool. She pulled the baby close as they stepped past the iron gate. It's the same one she once stood outside with trembling hands. Now she walked with her head high. She was clicking against the stone path with purpose. She had no mansion, but she had something bigger, a voice, a future, and the strength to never knock for crumbs again.